Honor of Valor, Quilts of Valor organization to present quilts to 5 of our veterans. And they'll do the presentation up here on the right front. So if everybody would please stand, Major Al Harvard is going to do the Pledge of Allegiance.
You need me into a video somewhere?
Yeah, you're on screen.
Okay, all you veterans, let's salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The Invocation by Tim Richards.
May we pray. Dear Lord, as members of the Freedom Committee, we've gathered to pass the torch of freedom on to the future generations. We ask for your guidance and your blessing. We pray for our country, that the unrest may be settled, that our president may make wise and good decisions. We ask for members that are sick and ill, that you give them comfort and healing. God bless the veterans who have fought to protect our freedom. God bless America, for it is in God we trust. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to the new folks that are coming to watch for the first time. We hope you'll sign up with our organization. Today we have a special, we're going to give the George Chamber Navy birthday discount, and we're going to take $10 off your initiation fee. You should take that survey. So I need, if Esther, would you introduce the folks with you, and then we'll read off the name.
Good morning, all. Thank you for having us here. Quilts of Valor Association really likes to present our veterans with the gratitude that you all deserve. I have with me Phyllis and Don Jenneru, and as many of you know, I'm nothing like Barbara. Barbara is in Idaho at the present moment, having fun with the great-grandchild, and the second one on the way. So anyway, without further ado, when I call off names, if you're here, please come forward. And I'll tell you all a little bit about Quilts of Valor, and we will present the quilts, and we wrap you all in our love. And a whole bunch of things are going to happen, so bear with me. Okay. Robert Casillas. Not here, okay. Jared Deline, did I pronounce that correctly? Yeah. William Stewart. And please don't drop the papers that are in there. William Stewart? No. Victor Real? Real? Ben Swatchman?
Well, that's just damn like it.
Dennis Washington? This one? So we only have the two gentlemen today. Shame.
Give that to them.
Quilts of Valor Foundation was started shortly after 9/11. And I'm sure most of you are aware of that. Anyway, our local chapter, we have made over 6,500 quilts. We've awarded over 3,000. And when you take those two numbers, it might not sound like much. But if you break each quilt down, they take between 50 to 100 hours of many people's hands in there. So they are true works of art. And that's why when somebody says, oh, that's a pretty blanket, we real quick will jump on you and tell you that you can buy a blanket at Kmart, a quilt you cannot. So thank you, gentlemen, but don't go anywhere. I've got a little certificate to read. The Quilts of Valor Foundation wishes to recognize you for your service to our nation. We consider it a privilege to honor you, but we may never know the extent of your sacrifice and service to protect and defend the United States of America. As an expression of gratitude, we award you this Quilt of Valor. And also, when we make these, we make them with a lot of love. So we are going to wrap them in our love. And I'm going to get in one of these. Barbara's always in the picture. And you guys will turn around. So it's not going to get up. Oh, we need to turn that way for us. Whoops. And always look at the quilting on the back. There's a label on the back that says who pieced it, who quilted it, and a lot of times who did the binding. And you can see mostly by the back quilting that there's I'm seeing eagles and words on this one, on the marine one. And what do we have over here? Squirrels. So we thank you very much for all of your service.
We appreciate this organization so much. They are a volunteer group. And I think you're still working out of the facility in Bellflower?
We are actually a church in Bellflower.
Okay,
Because of the whole thing.
all right.
Parks and Rec and things people, so we're the church.
So these folks operate out of Bellflower, and unfortunately, we didn't have all of our veterans here. So if you sign up for a quilt, then you can anticipate it's going to be at the next meeting, or if it's not, I'll give you a heads up. But anyway, I want to thank you folks for being here and for what you do. We really appreciate it. If you have some extra money around, send them a check at a 501c3.
And just
Thank you.
real quick.
Okay, so the request forms, if you want a quilt, you can pick one up at the front desk or right at or the first time we take a break, and pick one up. Any questions? Right, this is the most dangerous part of the meeting, and I need somebody that really is command and control, so I'm wondering if Tom Weaver, would you pass the microphone around? Military name, rank, theater of operation, and if you want to tell your story, I want you to sign up for our speakers training course. I promise to do that. And so let's start. Thank you.
My name is Tom Weaver, Navy SEAL, 30 years, Vietnam, China, Gemini, and Apollo recovery.
Perfect. Didn't talk about his softball team, national champion. Okay.
You did all that? Last week, Las Vegas.
Gary Kress, U.S. Navy, Mount Laurel Navy, rowboats, 2 years, 67 years. West Sea Sergeant First Class, United States Army, Korea. Ken Cornelson, Captain, U.S. Air Force, Ellsworth Air Force Base, and then Missile Launch Officer. James Lambert, 22 years in the Air Force, protecting democracy against communist aggression. Al Harvard, 22 years in the Army. Enlisted brave, OCS, 8 months, 6 months, and retired as a major. And I'd like to give some thought to speaking at this organization's meetings on a monthly meeting, because we're down to the last one that charter is in February, January, and that happens to be Scott. I'll tell him that soon. So if you would like to support that, speak to us, please let me know. And I know I shouldn't be taking advantage of this, but I'm going to. These are the books that I promised last time. They're the Constitution. So it's designed for 8th graders, and it says that. It explains why. Okay, so we're here. Come on by and get 1 or 2. 8th grade is just right for this group.
I'm Ed Bowen. I served in Vietnam in 1969 as a combat artist. I'm so glad I'm here today.
Frank Pangborn, 1st Cavalry Division, Vietnam, 1969, 1970. First Lieutenant. You know, Al's a little confused. You ever seen his hat? He's got a staff sergeant, and then he's got a major. You know, I don't even know if you had your, you got your major. He's a sergeant major now, he says.
I'm sitting next to the guys that are all confused. Jeff Upton, Army, 67, 68, served in Vietnam. Field radio repair. It's only 2 years. I was drafted, so I'm going to Fort Oregon. I'm here. So, I am with Oasis Senior Center in Corona del Mar. And after COVID, we're just now reopening, and we're going to be having our first meeting next Tuesday. I'm advertising it for all you folks. Everybody is involved. Let me know if you're all going to show up. I'm going to get more pizza. I've got. What is the meeting? What's a military veterans meeting? I have some brochures here. Mr. Ed Bowen is going to be presenting his Vietnam combat artist. I'm going to leave these brochures at the end of this table. So at the end of the meeting, if you're interested in coming by, please stop right on by and pick up a brochure. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Ray Walls, Sergeant E5, MP, 504th Battalion today, and 15th MP Battalion, 793rd Battalion in Germany, 1970 to 72.
Frank Mitchell III, United States Air Force Reserve, been in service 1984. Speaking on behalf of two great people in my family. My father, Sergeant Frank Mitchell Jr., United States Army, World War II European Theater. My great-grandfather, Private James Mitchell, American Civil War, United States Colored Troops, Georgia Campaign, Georgia Operations.
Thank you.
Pete Riley, you all know me, I'm Scotty's friend for over 50 years.
How does he do it?
My name's Dick Clark, 21 years in the Air Force and served in the Korean War, 53, 54.
Associate Member Lynn Redmond, was in Detachment 440, Air Force ROTC 62 to 65. I washed out. The Army tried to get me, but instead I got to work for Shell Oil and make jet fuel.
George Hill, United States Marine Corps, Master Gunnery Sergeant, retired. Iraq, Vietnam.
Mona Hill, associate, and my service Marine wife, 38 years.
Ray Grissom, Guttersmith, U.S. Navy, Guttersmith Guns, Tonkin Gulf Yacht Club.
Cindy Brenneman, associate member. Dad was in the Navy and Grandpa in the Army and served Vietnam.
Linda Williams, associate member. Martin Miller, associate member.
White House Marine Corps, 87 to 93. Happy birthday, squids and swans.
This was appreciated.
I'm sorry. Don Generou with Quilts of Valor.
Phyllis General with Don General with Quilts of Valor.
You already know me, I'm Esther Ferris, Barb Winkler's assistant, Quilts of Valor.
Thank you for being here.
Denise Wyland, I coordinate the school program for the Newport Mesa Unified School District, and we have some great news that I'll share later about getting back into our schools. My dad is also a World War II veteran, and I'm a proud daughter of him.
Anthony Allen, United States Navy, 1955 to 1963, ET2, all over the Pacific.
Evelyn Hart, proud associate member.
Sven Atkinson, U.S. Army, and during the Army in Vietnam, they called me Seven, so I might be easier. I was a helicopter pilot in Central Highlands, 69-70.
Wayne Scott, United States Air Force, 1976 to 2005, one tour in Europe plus deployments to Southwest Asia and South America for counter drone ops.
Rick Sundell, I was in the Army E5 in from 67 to 71, 68 and 69 in East Africa, 70 and 71 in Vietnam.
Lucky Walsh, United States Navy, 1959 to 65. As a quartermaster, I served on destroyers in South Pacific, Western Pacific, Aleutian Islands, and Southeast Asia.
Paul Todd, United States Navy, 1970, 1974, served on two different ships, the USS Oklahoma City, flagship of 7th Fleet. USS Edson did 2 tours over Vietnam, been fire support. Glad to be here. I'm just signed up to join this group. Thank you.
Yeah, Bob Bowles, a Navy captain, 31 years, Cold War, Vietnam, and happy birthday to all my Navy buddies.
David Larson, Captain, United States Air Force, Vietnam, 1970, 71, and I've since been back 6 times for charitable work.
Nick Sifan, U.S. Navy, U.S. Army, 1984 to 2008.
George Chambers, 1950 to 1970, retired as Senior Chief Missile System Technician.
My name is Eric Jans. I served in the Navy from 1990 to 1994 as a quartermaster, served in the Pacific Fleet, Indian Ocean, Persian Gulf, and the Red Sea. And from 2014 or 2008 to 2014, served in the Army and was an all-force analyst.
Billy Adams' application as we speak. Sherry Daggs, associate member, proud daughter, Master Sergeant Charles K. Conow, U.S. Marine Corps, Pearl Harbor survivor, chosen few, and God bless his soul. This is his granddaughter, Sherry Lee Gutches, who is a U.S. Army vet, met her husband at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. I won't mention my nickname for Lawton, Oklahoma. And our first, my first grandchild was born at Fort Sill Medical, Shylin Rose Gutches. And my second grandchild, Brian Gutches, was born at Fort, it was Madigan. Yeah, Madigan at the Joint Base Lewis, Fort Lewis and Fort Washington. Now they're both veterans and the kids aren't joining.
Associate member, wife, and me, mom.
And Jerry Tingle, retired Senior Chief, 30 years. You know, I don't know if you guys know, but George Chambers over there, he was a plank owner on the USS Fox, and that was my first ship. And so sometimes it's a small Navy. Happy birthday to all the Navy folks out here. In my 30 years, I did 9 ships. I did a tour in Iraq as well. Just happy to be here. I don't see Carol Singleton here. She's over at Heroes Hall. And today, a couple of the members here in the room, Ed Bowen has some art displayed. Bill Stewart has some scrimshaw pieces that he did that are displayed. And I also put some plaques in that are going to be displayed over there at Heroes Hall for the next couple of months. So if you go over there, it's just right across the street here. If they have a parking attendant, you just tell them to go to Heroes Hall and it's free. The exhibit's free for the next couple of months. Anyways, we have a tradition in the Navy that the oldest and the youngest cut the cake. So Scott forgot the cake, but there's a donut over there. But I'm just curious, who's the oldest Navy guy and who's the youngest Navy guy? Mom, how old are you, Mom? George, how old are you? Okay, so 90 gets it. How about youngest? Nick?
I'm 56.
Oh, we got a 50-year-old. Okay, so we got those guys. Hey, happy birthday, Navy.
What's a plank holder?
So a plank owner of a ship, they actually go through the process of the commissioning process. So basically, it's the first crew of a ship commission is a plank owner.
Israel, United States Marine Corps, 1953, 1961. Spent my time in the infantry, except for my last 3 years, I became the first presidential helicopter crew chief, flying President Eisenhower.
Thank you. Got 2 or 3 more here. Did I miss anybody over here?
They're Navy 66 to 70, second class petty officer with crypto technician, survivor of the Israeli attack on the USS Liberty.
Thank you, Don.
I'm John Williams. I was a QM2 in the U.S. Coast Guard up in God's country, Alaska, doing some great law enforcement, search and rescue work. Humbled and honored to be in the room with you all. Thanks for having me.
Jim Richards, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I served in Korea and Vietnam in 27 years.
Great job. You were 5 minutes over
Mhm.
them. Scott Williams, United States Army, 1966 to 69. It ruined by Christmas in 66, but we got over it. Went to Vietnam in 1968 and came back in 69. So I think this is the time where we sing the happy birthday to the Navy. But I think they always give the honor to the Coast Guard person that's in the room. So will the Coast Guard stand up and? Oh, would you like to say happy birthday to your Navy brothers? All right, let me give you.
All right. I hope it's the regular happy birthday song, because I happen to know that one by heart. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, U.S. Navy. Happy birthday to you. Oh.
246 years.
All right. I know that Navy always thinks that the Coast Guard is their little brother, right? But I think that your little brother did a great job. Thank you very much. Now we're going to get into our today's speaker. It is Colonel Wayne R. Scott, United States Air Force, Specialty Communications, July 76 to October 2005. And reserve dates goes from 75 to 76. Armed conflicts, Operation Allied Force, Kosovo, Operation Northern Watch, Iraq, Operation Enduring Freedom, Afghanistan, Operation Southern Watch, Iraq, Theater of Operations, Europe, Middle East, decorations and awards. I think I'll go for the first 2 lines. It's 6 lines. Congratulations. Legion of Merit, Meritorious Service Medal, Air Force Commendation Medal, Air Force Achievement Medal, Air Force Outstanding Unit Award, Air Force Organizational Excellence Award, Combat Readiness, National Defense Service, Kosovo Campaign Medal, Global War on Terrorism Medal, Humanitarian Service Medal, Air Force Overseas, Long Tour Ribbon, Air Force Longevity Service Ribbon, Air Force Training Ribbon. Speaking to his presentation today is the wars after 9/11. Please welcome Colonel Wayne Scott. Thank you.
Okay, I'm honored to be here today. I've been several mentions already about this being the United States Navy's birthday. So why would we have a U.S. Air Force guy speak on the Navy's birthday? Right? Where's
Scotty's got it.
Scott's got it. So the answer to that, if the slides are going to come up.
Okay, we'll bring him up in just a second.
Actually, while he's getting it ready, the answer to it is because I was asked the same question a little over 4 years ago, 2017. I was working for Raytheon, and we had a brand new member of the Raytheon board of directors Admiral James Winnefeld. He had just retired as vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, joined the board of directors at Raytheon, and so they wanted to brief him on all the Navy programs going on. And so at the time, I was the program manager for something called the Joint Precision Approach and Landing System, JPALS, which is a GPS-based precision landing system for U.S. aircraft carriers. And so I had to fly to Boston to go brief Admiral Winnefeld on this program. And my boss's boss's boss, who was the vice president, got up and did this very glowing introduction. And I picked up the microphone and stepped in the front of the room. And the first thing before I even started, Admiral Winnefeld said, "Why do we have an Air Force officer running this Navy program?" Well, fortunately, I was prepared for that question. The answer is on the screen here. That's the world's greatest naval aviator. Happens to be my father. I'm a Navy brat. So my dad was a Navy pilot, flew off of straight jet carriers, flew with the F-31. It was during the Korean War. He did not go to Korea. He was deployed to the Mediterranean twice. He was actually at sea on the USS Lincoln, CVA-32, when I was born. So naval aviation is in my blood. And Admiral Winnefeld said, "Okay, go ahead." So I hope for all the Navy personnel present that while this is the Navy's 246th birthday, happy birthday. It's okay, I'm gonna go ahead and talk about something. I was on active duty on 9/11. I'm sure others in the room were as well. I was asked 10 years ago to do a presentation on the military response to 9/11. I will preface this by saying I did not see combat action either in Iraq or Afghanistan. I did deploy to that theater in 2002. I was actually assigned to the Combined Air Operations Center, which at the time was in Saudi Arabia. We were already engaged in Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. Operation Iraqi Freedom had not yet started. That started in the spring of 2003. And so while literally thousands, hundreds of thousands have served in those combat theaters, the focus today is going to be on those who were involved in more of the initial responses and the immediate aftermath of 9/11 attacks.
Colonel, could you move with receipt to your left?
I got to be careful how far I move because I don't want to. I've been told that there's a laser guided weapon on this side of this line over here. So I can try to be shorter, but that's about the best I can do. Or I tell you what. Does this help? I'm not a lectern kind of guy, but I'm a roamer. But if this works, then we'll go ahead and do this. So to understand the military response to 9/11 and the aftermath, the immediate aftermath of the attacks, the first thing you have to understand is what did our military posture look like on September 10th, the day before? The military, senior leadership in particular, but a lot of us are often accused of always being prepared to fight the last war rather than the next war. And so up until September of 2001, our air defense posture was still based on a Cold War scenario. Our radar coverage was along our coasts and our borders, looking outward to detect any kind of a hostile or unknown unidentified aircraft penetrating our airspace. If it could not be identified, a fighter would be sent up to intercept it to determine its intent, and if deemed hostile, would be shot down. And so on September 10th, this is what our military radar coverage is. Everything looking outbound, looking out across the approaches to our nation, defending against any kind of an air attack. To complicate that, the FAA was operating under assumption that all air traffic within our borders would be cooperative. What that means is they assumed that every aircraft flying in U.S. airspace would be actively broadcasting its location and its identification so we would know who it was, what it is. Most of you are familiar with this thing, right? It's radar. Actually, there's two systems operating here. The bottom half of it is what you think of as a radar. Big radar dish sends out a high-powered beam of radar energy, bounces off Anything in the air, it's reflected back, puts a blip on a radar screen so that the air traffic controllers can see where that aircraft is. And use that to control airspace, make sure there's separation for safety, things like that. The second system of operation is actually the top part of this. It's called a secondary radar. Actually, it sends out a radio signal that is received by the aircraft. And the aircraft then replies with an identification squawk that identifies the aircraft. There are special codes that can be, you can turn in any kind of, air traffic controllers all the time tell a pilot to set in 4 digits here so they can identify the aircraft. There are certain codes that are used. 1200 means you're flying VFR, visual flight rules, CNBC, that's what most of your light aircraft traffic is flying today. But there are codes for hijack and calm out and emergency. But based on the fact that they were assuming cooperative aircraft and cooperative airspace, the FAA was no longer maintaining this radar at all. The entire air traffic system was based on the secondary radar, the transponder signal, and the transponder of the aircraft. So when the hijackers took over those aircraft the morning of 9/11, the first thing they did was turn off the transponder. The FAA could not see them, did not know where they were, did not know who they were, just totally, they just disappeared off of their radar scopes. These are the 4 flights that crashed that day. The first one that took off was American 11 out of Boston, took off at 7:59. You can see it flew a short distance. They were all 4 of these aircraft were actually scheduled to fly over the West Coast. Flew a short distance and turned off the transponder. And so FAA controllers are going, called them by radio a couple of times. Terrorists, of course, are not going to respond. And so they thought they heard the word hijack on the radio before the transponder got turned off. And so they immediately called NORAD, asked NORAD to launch an aircraft to go investigate and see if there was a hijack in progress. So 2 fighters, Air National Guard fighters, took off out of Otis Air Force Base, Otis Air National Guard Base in Massachusetts. So the problem is they didn't know where the aircraft was that they were supposed to go intercept because their transponder was off. And in fact, as you can see from the red line there on the top right, the aircraft shortly after hijacking had turned south toward New York City. So the aircraft were out there kind of searching for it. That morning, I was on duty at Langley Air Force Base in Hampton, Virginia, Air Combat Command Headquarters. Again, I'm on the East Coast, so we're already a couple hours into our duty day. And having a conversation with a couple of my NCOs about a software program we were developing. And one of them walked up to me and said, "Hey, we just heard on the radio that an aircraft crashed into the World Trade Center. Can we turn on the TV in your office?" And so I said, "Okay, yeah, sure. That's the only TV in the building. Go right ahead." And I continued my conversation. A few minutes later, I went and joined them. And what I was expecting when I walked into the office was there had been previous events where aircraft had crashed into skyscrapers in New York City. There was a light aircraft that crashed into the Empire State Building in 1945. So I was expecting cloudy, overcast day, tail of a Cessna 172 sticking out of the side of the Empire State World Trade Center. I walk in, and I'm looking at the TV. Here's this clear blue sky, sunny day, big gaping hole in the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Smoke pouring out of it. And we're standing there trying to figure out how could an aircraft not see that for miles and run into that building. And while we're standing there contemplating it, I saw what probably a lot of you saw. I was watching this live. It was at 9:03 a.m. Watched United 175 fly into the picture and smash into the South Tower. Stood there in stunned silence for a few moments. And I turned and said what a lot of us said that day, which is, we're at war. Let's lock everything down because we're going to be put to a very, very high threat condition, THREATCON Delta, just a short time later than we were. And so that was my first exposure to it, literally watching it live. Still not really clear on what's going on. And while we're standing there looking at the TV, trying to understand it, I hear, because my office was in a hangar right on the flight line at Langley Air Force Base. And I heard two F-16s take off full afterburner, just screaming down the runway and make a lot of noise. And afterburner means they can accelerate to Mach 1 faster than the speed of sound, literally in just seconds. And those aircraft took off and turned north, heading toward Washington, D.C. And they had been launched to defend the skies over the Capitol. The only thing is, at about the same time they were launching, American 77 crashed into the Pentagon. This is still less than 1 hour after the first crash. So you probably all know these things. We haven't thought about them maybe in a while, but all of these events transpired in an hour and change. And we were still trying to figure out what's going on as another crash, another crash, another crash. One of the things that started to happen at this point was, for those of you who have studied your military science, military history, there was a famous Prussian officer named Karl von Clausewitz who wrote a book called On War. And one of the terms he coined was something called the fog of war. The fog of war is when, in the early days of any kind of conflict, any kind of a crisis, is that there's a lot of information that starts to flow and it's not all valid. There's this confusion on what's really going on. And so the fog of war really loomed large that morning. There were reports within the first hours that there were multiple aircraft squawking hijacked in the skies over the U.S. A plane had crashed near Camp David. A car bomb had exploded in downtown Washington, D.C. All of these things were reported. And, oh, by the way, as soon as they came out, what's the news media do? Broadcast it, tell everybody, get that information out there. Well, of course, all of those things turned out not to be true, but every one of them had to be followed up and investigated to see if there was any kind of law enforcement or military response required. And so a lot of confusion going on in the early hours. So again, F-16 taken off from Langley Air Force Base, fully armed, turned north. There have been stories for years that one of these aircraft shot down United 93 over Shanksville, Pennsylvania. That did not happen. The aircraft crashed several minutes before these guys could have gotten anywhere near them. But they have already launched. The other thing that the military was responsible for that day was protecting the president. President Bush had flown to Sarasota, Florida the day before to do some campaigning for his education bill. I'm sure you've seen the film footage of him being advised that there had been some crashes after the first crash. And then once the second crash occurred at the South Tower, the Secret Service immediately hustled the president out to Air Force One that took off from Sarasota, climbed very, very rapidly. Again, nature of the attack not known, get the president someplace out of harm's way. They launched with the intent of going back to Washington, D.C. Secret Service said, no way, it's not safe. And so the aircraft was diverted and landed at Barksdale Air Force Base in Shreveport, Louisiana. Had a fighter escort once it was in the air about 30 minutes. Landed in Shreveport, the president recorded a brief message to the American people about what was going on, reboarded Air Force One, flew to Offutt Air Force Base in Omaha, Nebraska, where the president was immediately sheltered in the underground command post there that was designed to withstand a nuclear attack. And that's where he was conducting the early part of his direction, his responsibilities as commander-in-chief. Now, this aircraft is really remarkable. You heard in my bio, I'm a communications officer. The communications capability on this aircraft is beyond remarkable. Throughout the time, the president was on Air Force One and on the ground at his two Air Force bases. He was in constant communication with the Vice President, the Secretary of Defense, the Joint Chiefs, the Director of the CIA, getting information, giving direction on how we were going to respond to these attacks. One of the remarkable things that happened is I'm not sure if it was the first or the second flight, as Commander-in-Chief, he gave the order for U.S. military aircraft were authorized to shoot down any civilian airliner that was considered a threat to Washington, D.C. Sounds like it makes sense, but think about it. Okay, you're a military pilot, you're airborne, armed aircraft, and you are being asked possibly to shoot down a civilian airliner loaded with American citizens. Never been done before, never even thought of before. One of the interesting things is that a lot of your commercial airline pilots are in fact guard and reserve pilots. So the pilot flying the fighter might actually know the guy flying the commercial airliner, and he's been asked maybe to shoot him down. Fortunately, it did not come to that. But by around the time the president got to Offutt Air Force Base, they launched this other 747, modified 747 called an E4. This is the National Airborne Operations Center, NAOC. Capability that was created back in the 80s so that we would have an appropriate command authority still in existence to oversee military responses during a crisis. Had been exercised dozens and dozens of times. The aircraft is moved around to make sure that it's safe and not destroyed during an attack. 9/11/2001, the very, very first time this aircraft was ever airborne operationally, rather than for just training. So by 3 o'clock on September 11th, so we're now 6 to 7 hours into this attack. We've got fighter aircraft flying combat air patrol over US cities all over the country. We've got AWACS aircraft controlling them. The pilots have instructions to shoot down airliners that are considered a threat to Washington, D.C. A very, very brand new scenario. The rules of engagement, how do we do this? They literally are writing these as they go because nothing like this had ever happened before. And all of that is still just hours after the initial attack. The next part of this, I'm gonna go over some notes here simply because the timeline becomes very, very, very significant. By that evening, actually, General Richard Myers, who Air Force retired general, had been vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and in fact, that morning was in a Senate confirmation hearing about being selected and confirmed to be the next chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And obviously, when these actions started happening, they adjourned the confirmation hearing, and he went back to the Pentagon. When he got there, American 77 had already crashed. The fire alarms went off all over the building. There's smoke obviously pouring out of a large gaping hole on the west side of the building. He went down to the National Military Command Center, which is down in the basement of the Pentagon. And the individuals on duty at the NMCC that day were sitting there at their desks, coordinating information, giving direction to military units, with smoke coming out of the air conditioning vents and the alarms blaring, evacuate the building, evacuate the building. And none of them left their post that day because they knew where they needed to be and what they needed to do. So that evening, very late in the evening, when General Myers finally left the building, he wrote in his book that he walked out of the building, his uniform smelled like smoke. And you've been to Washington, D.C., you know that the Pentagon is not very far from Reagan National Airport. So you walk out of the Pentagon, you can hear the sound of commercial aircraft coming and going. He said he walked out the door, and he said he did not hear commercial aircraft. He heard the distinctive sound of fighter aircraft circling over Washington, D.C. In his words, what he called it was the sound of a nation at war. And that was just the first day. President Bush insisted on, yes, sir.
Question. At some time during 9/11, wasn't there a directive to all civilian aircraft to don't land right where they were?
That was, yes. I'm sorry, I did not cover that, but yes, there was a directive that went from from the president through both the military and the FAA, that all aircraft in US airspace had to land at the nearest airport immediately. And they cleared the skies within, I don't have the exact timeline on that, I'm sorry, you know what, that's a good question, I will find that and make sure I work this in for the future. What was amazing is in some cases, they landed some very large commercial aircraft full of passengers on some very small airfields. Because it was, I'm sorry, well, you know, Chicago's only another 500 miles. No, you need to land in Des Moines. And so it was a real interesting thing for the airline industry because they literally had some aircraft that had to strip a lot of equipment out of them to get the weight down just so they could get it back off the ground in the limited amount of runway space in the middle. But so by that evening, and President Bush spent a few hours at Offutt Air Force Base, and they kept telling him he needed to stay there to be safe. And he said, "I'm the commander-in-chief, and my responsibilities need to be executed from the nation's capital. I'm going there now." And so he went back later that evening to get back to Washington State. So that was September 11th. September 12th, President Bush met with his National Security Council, called the events of 9/11 an act of war, and told his staff that the full power of the United States government, civil and military, would be devoted to the goal of hunting down and destroying the enemy who had perpetrated the attacks. September 14th, day 3, Congress authorizes the president to use all necessary and appropriate force against the parties responsible for the attacks. September 18th, the president approved a simultaneous diplomatic and military approach, and General Tommy Franks from the United States Central Command had the official authority to proceed with planning a military option. What was interesting is we're now going after targets here, and that required us to have access to a lot of places that we had not operated out of before. We had a lot of forces already down in this area, had since the early days of the first Gulf War. So we had forces in Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Bahrain, all down in this area. We had naval forces, of course, in the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Sea. But General Franks and his staff determined that for this to be effective, we needed to have troops in places we had not been to before, like Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. There's a bunch of them up there that we've not heard of before, and now all of a sudden we were negotiating basing rights so we could put troops on the ground there. So on September 20th, President Bush addressed the nation, joint session of Congress, demanded that the Taliban regime of Afghanistan surrender the leaders of Al-Qaeda or share in their fate. September 21st, General Franks briefed the President and Vice President on his military plan, involving naval, ground, air, and special ops forces. Started doing basing agreements for so we can move forces into that region in late September. We started learning the names of places like Karshi-Khanabad. Never heard of Karshi-Khanabad before. Eventually, just abbreviated K2. What's become known here in the last 2-3 years is K2 is the Agent Orange of the Afghanistan war. Karshi-Khanabad had been a Soviet air base, which they abandoned when they left Afghanistan. It was loaded with hazardous chemical waste. There were drainage ponds there that glowed in the dark. And so much like Agent Orange, much like the burn pits of the first Gulf War, the incidence of severe health issues and cancers and whatever among those who were stationed at Karshi-Khanabad are at levels 10 to 20, 30 times normal. A lot of the same things we saw with the Vietnam veterans that were exposed to Agent Orange. So by early October, all the forces had been moved in place. Long-range B-2 bombers. B-2 bombers never landed in this region. They were being launched from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri flying all the way to Afghanistan, dropping their bombs and flying back, and never landing anywhere in between. A lot of tankers in between. So the U-2s were ready. Navy ships with cruise missiles were in the Arabian Sea. Army Special Forces were at Karshikanabat. And so on Sunday, October 7th, General Franks reported to the president that all of his forces were in place and he was ready to start executing this plan. And so shortly after sunset in Afghanistan that day was the official start of Operation Enduring Freedom. 26 days after the attacks. By comparison, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait August 2nd, 1990. The air campaign, which was the first part of Desert Storm, started in January, 5.5 months. This operation was planned, the forces were put in place, and the plan was executed starting 26 days after the 9/11 attacks. So eventually we have forces operating from all of these locations that you see here. But one of the things that we tend to think about the U.S. military being involved in exclusively in combat operations. This is a strike map from Operation Enduring Freedom, October 9th, day 3. The triangles are targets that are going to be struck that day. This little box here you see in the red circle, that was a place where humanitarian relief was dropped that day because a large number of Afghans had been displaced by the Taliban and were basically refugees in their own country along their own borders. And so part of the planning included not only military strikes against hostile targets, but also providing humanitarian relief. And so, let's see, within 2 hours of the first bombs falling on October 7th, Air Force C-17 cargo aircraft out of Ramstein, Germany, dropped 35,000 daily ration packs in northern Afghanistan. It was a 22-hour, 6,500-mile mission. Those drops continued through December, and by the time they were done, they had dropped 2.4 million daily rations, in addition to wheat, blankets, cold weather gear, all to help the displaced refugees. So it wasn't just about combat, it was about humanitarian relief as well. Now, so that initial response was all really focused on dealing with our adversary, our enemy in Afghanistan. But things were really changing here at home as well. The first time, when I was stationed in Germany, I was always amazed that anytime I walked into an airport or a train station, there were uniformed military armed with fully automatic weapons that were patrolling those train stations and airports. And I always thought how odd that they thought it required that kind of a show of force just to provide their major transportation, protect their major transportation hubs. And yet, once air travel opened back up and I had to start traveling for work again, what did I see? U.S. National Guard troops in uniform with fully automatic weapons patrolling the airports. Because it wasn't just a matter of providing that protection. It was a visible deterrent. We were trying to make sure that any enemy that would consider doing that again, there would be a visible deterrent towards seeing that kind of action happening. So we saw this. It was a little bit disconcerting, but we readily accepted because we saw this as part of maintaining and ensuring our freedom. The other thing that happened is, as I showed you the radar picture earlier, this is what it looked like 6 months later. First thing is the FAA went out and reactivated and maintained all of the surveillance radars that they had monitoring U.S. airspace. They then connected all of those radars to the same NORAD system. So now the U.S. military air defenses had visibility of the entire U.S. airspace. In addition, at every FAA comm site, they went in and put in new radios specifically on military frequencies, so that military leaders could talk directly to any kind of military aircraft that's involved in the intercept operation. So our ability to defend the skies was enhanced significantly. In addition, this is the system that was in use on 9/11. It had been in use since the Cold War. Very, very antiquated, green phosphorus, digital, analog radar screens. You know, the sweet thing, kind of remember from seeing in movies and everything. That was replaced by a system that's all digital, all computerized. This thing's called the Battle Control System. I was actually the deputy program manager as we were finishing development of this. This system was fantastic in that not only did it give a much better graphical representation of the airspace to be able to see all the aircraft, but it had algorithms built into it that literally, if I got an aircraft out here someplace that I can't identify, and I need to send an intercept aircraft after that, I literally could click on the target, click on the fighter, and it would tell me exactly the heading, airspeed, and how much time to intercept. It calculated it just in fractions, and that can be passed to the pilot of that intercept aircraft. Most of you are familiar with this. This has become kind of a weapon system of choice ever since we got involved in Iraq and Afghanistan. Predator drone, the military refers to it as a UAV, unmanned aerial vehicle. The term drone is what's commonly used in the news media today. We, of course, were using these extensively in Afghanistan shortly after the start of operations there. But the problem is very mountainous country. We didn't have forces within Afghanistan. So I'm not only flying these in Afghanistan, but the people who need to see the video of what it's looking at so they can make decisions about targets and where are hostile forces, where I need to put friendly forces. I need to see the video at Central Command in Florida and at the Air Operations Center in Saudi Arabia. Well, how do I do that? Oh, satellite trying to nothing to that. You just hook up all the satellites. Well, it was actually rather complicated. And this is actually my personal involvement because my team actually designed all of this. What we ended up with was the ability to launch a Predator from Afghanistan. Once it got to altitude, connected to a satellite, the video had to be seen in Florida. It needed to be seen in Saudi Arabia. Oh, by the way, that's too far to get through a single satellite hop, so I had to hop it through Germany. And in some cases, I had a feedback loop. And all of this was put in place in just a few weeks. I never thought I'd be involved in what does it take to lease a satellite transponder. But we grabbed quite a few of them. Actually, believe it or not, it got a challenge because we were competing with the news media for access to the satellites to be able to put this system together. I was really proud of what we accomplished there. A lot of it has become more sophisticated and updated since then, but this is what we put together literally 20 years ago. Now, then of course, at the time, it's highly classified that we were flying Predators with Hellfire missiles on them. As a matter of fact, it wasn't the military that was originally doing this, it was another three-letter agency in Washington, D.C. But now the reliability and the quality of the video had to be really, really good because literally someone sitting in Florida was going to make a decision about, are we going to shoot that truck or not? And so they had put this thing together by this other agency, and the video quality was garbage. It was just terrible. And so I got called and said, you need to fix this. Well, it turns out that the interconnect node was in a building at Langley Air Force Base, where I was stationed, in a highly secure facility. And so I went and got 2 video technicians who didn't have the proper security clearance. So they couldn't see what was on it. They couldn't know where it was coming from, where it was going to. They just had to make it better. I'm sure any of you guys who worked as technicians, I heard somebody here was an ET maybe ET earlier, okay, go. You don't know what it is, just face it. So I took these two guys in this classified room in the middle of the night and showed them all this equipment. They said, what is it? I said, can't tell you. Where's it going? Can't tell you. I'm on the phone with a guy in Saudi Arabia, and I said, it goes through that to that to that to that. The signal quality is lousy. What would you do? The guy goes, why there are two of those, that's making the signal too strong. I said, what do you do? He said, well, take out one, maybe both of them. I said, take out the first one. When the phone guy says, okay, it just got a little better. Take out the second one. Okay, that's better too. And so it kept doing this, you know, and then finally, I literally had the moment where the guy says, wherever your thumb is, hold it right there. Okay, that's what video's good. So I said, what do you guys do? I said, we disconnected that. Yeah, you can't disconnect that one. So, but anyway, so we literally were able to greatly improve that video so that we could make literally shoot the decision. There was one I had from another presentation I didn't put in here of a bunch of guys cheering one night because it was in 2003, I think, and they had video of a very tall guy in a white robe and a turban getting into a truck, and they thought for sure it was Osama bin Laden, and they put a Hellfire missile right in the middle of that truck. I don't know who got that Hellfire missile, but it wasn't Osama bin Laden. Not that way. But I was really proud of that. Our contribution to making that work became literally the command, control, and strike weapon of choice in a lot of the Afghanistan war. And so I got this coin as a memento of that. It was kind of fun on the other side of it. Again, the other three that are agencies responsible for it. And on the back of this is, never mind, we'll do it ourselves. So that's the coin that I got from that. So now, kind of summarize, what happened on 9/11? You've probably seen these numbers, close to 3,000 victims that day on the 4 aircraft in New York City and 125 at the Pentagon, 55 of them uniformed military. And so that was the price on day one. Over the last 20 years, 7,000 killed, 53,000 wounded over 20 years. What I put in red, those had to be updated on August 31st. We thought the numbers were done. Well, we had 13, well, another Marines, one Navy corpsman, and one Army soldier that found out otherwise. So they were added in. Now, what's interesting, and especially for those of you who saw service in Vietnam, the ratio of wounded to killed is way higher than what we saw from Vietnam. And that's actually a good thing. And there's some military reasons for that. The first is that we moved critical care up to the front. I mean, yeah, we had MASH units in Korea, we had MASH units in Vietnam, and they were pretty close by. But the type and the level of care, doctors and surgeons that we had way forward, they could get to these wounded earlier. They could get them stabilized and get them transported to a major medical facility or medical ship a lot sooner, which is why we had a lot higher survival rate. This photo is fascinating because here's somebody wounded being carried into a medical tent. This is a helicopter crew member. I mean, that guy hadn't been off the helicopter 2-3 minutes, and they're already getting him into a medical facility. And so that's the kind of care that made a difference in greatly reducing the loss of life. 7,000 is too high, but it could have been way worse. They also put in something called Tactical Combat Casualty Care, TCCC, special combat application tourniquets, all the way out in the front line with the soldiers, Marines carrying those on the ground to stem the loss of blood, biggest cause of loss of life in combat. Hypothermia prevention kits, chemically heated blankets and hoods to keep their body temperature up and reduce the going in shock. Portable CT scans, so they could go in and scan somebody and find embedded shrapnel and go in very, very specifically and take that out rather than have it be large, invasive and exploratory surgery to try to find shrapnel. Vascular trauma surgeons, again, way forward because a lot of the shrapnel, those wounded by IEDs, blood vessels are what get severed, and so having vascular surgeons that are skilled to repair those was really, really critical. Emergency dialysis equipment, very, very critical for burn victims. And again, reduced size way forward so that it can be used to save lives. Every soldier and Marine going into the field by late in the Afghanistan war had as much medical training and medical equipment as a combat medic from Vietnam. So basically, everybody out there was a medic and could very likely save the life of their buddy should they be wounded in the field. And so all of these things combined had a tremendous impact on saving the lives of many soldiers, Marines, sailors, airmen that were wounded in the battlefield. I talked about the 2 aircraft that took off from Langley Air Force Base that morning and the ones that took off from Otis Air Force Base. Those were actually the first sorties of what eventually became Operation Noble Eagle. Operation Noble Eagle is still an active operation. It has been for 20 years. They have flown over 55,000 sorties. They have responded to over 2,350 unidentified aircraft. Have to go out and find is there a threat here? Is there a risk? They support national security special events. In the early days after 9/11, there were aircraft flying combat air patrol over major cities all the time. Eventually, they dropped back to only supporting NSSEs. What are those? Inauguration, Super Bowl, World Series, Rose Parade, any kind of a major event where there are very, very large gatherings of people. There is a combat air patrol flying over that area to make sure that there is not an airborne threat against them. We're still at war. The 20 years, I mean, people would say, well, Afghanistan's finally over. Yeah, official combat operations are there, but we still have people there that hate us and would like to destroy our country. Our United States military is remaining vigilant to make sure that doesn't happen. I like closing with this. You may have seen this before. I'll just read it. War is an ugly thing, but not the ugliest of things. The decayed and degraded state of moral and patriotic feeling which thinks that nothing is worth war is much worse. The person who has nothing for which he's willing to fight, nothing which is more important than his own personal safety, is a miserable creature and has no chance of being free unless made and kept so by the exertions of better men than himself. I am honored to be in a room full of those better men and women. Whether it was post 9/11, before, whether it was World War II, Korea, Vietnam, you are the better men and women who have kept others free. This was written in the 19th century. It is still true today. One final quote I'd like to go through.
You know, we need that on our newsletter.
Yeah, it is a good one. I got this out of a book by Vice President Cheney. And he was at a meeting in 2008, and a chaplain from Special Operations gave the invocation, which I think is probably also belongs on our website. But in the invocation, I heard this at the Nixon Library in September of 2011, on the 10th anniversary. We are soldiers, God, agents of correction. May our world see the power of faith. May our nation know the strength of selfless service, and may our enemies continue to taste the inescapable force of freedom. Thank you. Answer questions.
No question, just a statement. That's the best story I've ever heard of national security, Afghanistan or Iraq. I've never heard of it in my entire life. 60 Minutes on CBS News Sunday morning news program special. On TV stories on cable TV about them. That's the best ever. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure.
Just a comment about the
soldiers as being equivalent to Vietnam ready. That's a pretty big comment. Obviously, you know, when we were in Vietnam, a lot of us didn't have tourniquets and a lot of other, we had big protests as our big protection and a few other things. So it is nice to hear that the military is upgrading the medical training, but it's still a pretty big comment about the comparison between the average GI and a medic.
I would agree with you, and it's certainly no intent to take anything away from the field medics from Vietnam. They did incredible work. They saved a lot of lives. It's probably more about the way that the soldiers in the field are equipped today. They have access to devices and technology that allow them to stem again, keep somebody warm for shock, stem the flow of blood, those kind of things. They call it the golden hour, right? If you can keep them alive for that first hour, their likelihood of survival is way up. And you're probably right. I will probably restructure that a little bit. It's more about what they are equipped with than their individual skills. It's a very good point.
It's a privilege to say that I've known Colonel Scott many years. When I worked for the same company, he was the way his presentations and my face with Colonel wants to purchasing that radio, and the program that he managed, JPAS, I contributed a lot of my efforts to bring in the products that we needed, because they were always in short time for delivery. The Navy was the customer, and they were in San Diego a lot to test, install, and make the JPAS work. And it was just for the identification. Can you tell the accuracy of JPAS?
Yeah, joint repeated precision, right? The question was, what's the precision of the JPAL system I mentioned earlier, Joint Precision Approach Landing System? GPS system on US Navy aircraft carriers. Right now, it's only on the F-35, although they're looking at it for the aircraft. But we can land an F-35 on a moving aircraft carrier with an accuracy of 20 centimeters. Which means I can land it in 0-0 up to sea state 5. So pilots kind of like that. We can get them back alive. Say again? Yeah, the sea state 5, which is pretty serious, up to 30 foot seas. So,
Colonel, aside from communication, detection, and response time improvements since 9/11, what's to stop something like this from happening again? We steal a couple of GS 700 Gulf Streams, load them up with explosives 100 miles from Washington, D.C. and run them into something. What's to stop that? Anything?
that crosses over. That's really more of an intel gathering, surveillance, assessment kind of capability. I did have some exposure late in my career to some of these systems and algorithms that are, okay, wait a minute, I got a guy who's a brother-in-law of a known terrorist, and he just got his pilot's license. He's in Indianapolis, and he just bought a Gulfstream 5. Okay, and all of a sudden, I've got 3 different pieces of information that all from independent sources that indicate that there may be a threat. The actual, what's to keep somebody from doing that? The answer is, there isn't a way to prevent it totally, but if our intel community is being affected, they are aware of people planning that kind of attack, and then we thwart it before it occurs. The interesting thing there is that has happened many times over the last 20 years, not necessarily a G5 full of explosives, but there have been enough indications where they became aware of somebody was plotting an attack, and in fact was in fact defeated and And the threat was eliminated before it occurred. So it's really more of an intel community function to be able to detect the indicators of when something might be. Hope that answers your question. So,
Yeah, your chart when you were going through the drones about satellite counts, were those geostationary satellites?
yes. Yeah, I believe they all were. The Intel satellites go on a polar orbit and they're moving too far and too fast to be able to use them reliably for communication paths. Yeah, I believe they were all geostationary, if not at least geosynchronous.
General, is it MAP?
Thank you for the promotion, sir.
Mutual assured construction.
That is kind of, the question is whether it was it ever effective. Certainly having nuclear weapons is a deterrent to an adversary who might attack you. But also, there's also obviously reluctance to use a nuclear weapon because of the devastating results. You know, certainly our inventory is way down. I should probably defer to my good friend Ken, who you know used to sit there underground in a silo waiting to find out if he was going to get an order saying, okay, turn the key, this thing's going to Moscow. Certainly we don't have the same kind of adversarial relationship with the Soviet Union now that we had then, although I certainly wouldn't call it war. And then we certainly would not use a nuclear weapon against somebody who wasn't equipped, a country who wasn't equipped with it. So it's kind of a hard question. I think deterrence is still effective. Whether mutual assured destruction is an effective component of it or not is
Wayne, we have time for one more question. Another question out there from anybody? All right, that's all right.
Thank you.
We only have a few minutes left, and I would like to cover real quick on my slideshow from this past Tuesday. The Newport Mesa Unified School District had their Board of Trustees meeting, which is, I guess, the second or the first Tuesday of each month. And they had on their agenda the funding for the Freedom Committee and for Denise Wyman. And I just wanted to show you a quick slideshow of what we did. And
Coming up in a second.
we have the slide changer. So basically, Denise had a slideshow, and then I followed on this particular agenda. So I just wanted to let you know. I'm sorry, I got this for. So what I did is start out with a slideshow that basically what you see at our meetings every month, that we're 501c3. I want to emphasize that because we're an entity that stands on its own. It's a nonprofit entity. There are no paid people in our organization. And next, I wanted them to know that we have a full board of directors, and those directors are all military folks. Because we thought it was very important that the veterans control their organization. And it's really dedicated to veterans that have honorably served.
You got your slides, Scotty. Try it now. There you go.
Right. So Jack Hammond, the founder along with other World War II, Pearl Harbor survivors to establish the longevity. And then we have our statement of what our purpose is. Basically, it's the purpose to enhance education to students, further their patriotic contributions to this country. This is our, I mentioned our board of directors, so General Law, Captain Roberts, Colonel Scott, Major Harvard, Captain Tim Richards, First Lieutenant Kirby Matter, Scott Williams, James Grimm, Gary Teagle, Doug Milliken, and Dwight Hansen. So when we started in 2011, I think we had 9 of the 11 board of directors were World War II veterans. So as you can see, we are aging, and we're bringing in what I call the younger guys in their 60s. And, also, I wanted them to know we vet our people, and if a number of you have been to different, well, like at the Martin Luther King as a Veterans Day, where you do interviews. Same with Rancho Cucamonga. When our guys go in, they've got their binder. They've got their binder, which contains their story in a paper format. Whereas other people go in and they're just trying to remember what they did. Not all, but you see the difference, and that's what makes our organization different. So I just put in quickly, so our vetting process, when you fill out your application, we want to make sure that we set up an interview with the applicant. We record this information. We want your military service because we are committing to this to the school district that we are vetting our people so we know that they're honorably discharged and so forth. And the reason we ask you to participate in the speakers training is that you'll see what other veterans have done, and even other veterans will work with you to get your presentation put together. And I think we've all asked for help from other people, and it's people that have good knowledge of the PowerPoint system and compute. And then I also showed, this is my DD 214, but I want them to know, because I think a lot of times they think you just walk out of the service and just walk into a classroom. Most of us waited 50 years, 40 years before it became on our plate. And then it's something that is more than just talking about somebody else's story, it's your story. Then we make your military bio. We'll send that out to the school district so they can see it. We have a speaker trainer. We have, this year we'll have a spreadsheet. It would be more an Excel spreadsheet where we have our chairman, Doug Milliken, will handle the speakers. We are working on this program right now. When we have that completed, we'll provide that information to Denise so that Denise can meet with the teachers and schedule. Then we'll have a schedule and we'll be able to track, the organization will be able to track who's speaking and who needs to speak. Doug Milliken is the chairman of the Freedom Committee's Living History Program. He works with veterans to help create the program. And obviously he's going to need some help from you that are already skilled, because putting together somebody's story, it takes hours. And that's from the gathering of the pictures or whatever you're going to do and putting together and getting into the slideshow. It's just, it takes time to do it. Doug is also the author of Testimony of the Protected. Major Alan Harvard has stepped forward. There's, so do y'all know how?
I was ready to my car Two need speakers, two locations, a brand new one, which is out in Thornville Hall. Jeff is trying to get back on his feet. Then here, every second Wednesday of the month. So I've got speakers all the way up through January. That would be, John.
The older John Williams.
So I need speakers to talk to us, and you're the pool. I don't have any outside people to go to. Get trained, but get you up there. So I sure appreciate your help. I program at least the next 4 or 5 months. I'd like to talk to you about it.
So Al is taking this on. So with that, it is for all of the programs here and the programs at DAR and the programs at other high schools in our once we get back to a full schedule. We have up on our website 120 plus stories by the people that are in this room. And I would like to, if you would take a look at that. We have added a special, what's called accessibility to assist impaired people. When they come to our site, they'll see a ADA wheelchair. You click on that. If you're sight impaired, you click on one of the features. Hearing impaired, you click on one of the features. And we're trying to make sure we get the transcription for the presentation, which is not as easy as I thought it was. It's, but working on that. So special, I mentioned a special presentation, the Battle of Lake Eagle, World War II, by Captain Bob Bowles. The reason I mentioned that, that was a chore. It was a challenge. We had, I think around 2013 or 14, had interviewed for our presentation Superintendent Norm Lotes, who was one of the superintendents at the Newport Mesa School District. He passed away probably within 6 months, and I could not find that video, but I knew it was a great story. And I had to buy, I actually have 2 books. They called The Gambier Bay. Gambier Bay was the name of the Jeep aircraft carrier. And I never really understood what that was about until I read the book. And it really centers upon the Marines and the Army. When you're going to Japan, you can't fly there from here. The range of the planes were about 1,000 miles on the bombers round trip. So they had to go island by island. So how do you support your infantry on the assault coming in from the sea, from the ocean? Well, you needed the battery of the battleships, but you needed airplanes to come in and directly hit the machine gun nest and hit the big weapons that they had. And that's the reason that these came in handy. The short story about the Gambier Bay, at the largest battle at the end of the war, the Battle of Lake Eagle, the Gambier Bay was there and part of the battle. And they were attacked by the Yamamoto, which was the largest battleship in the world at that time. And it had 18-inch guns, and it could fire 20 miles. The aircraft carrier had, I think, 5-inch guns or less. And as the story goes, they come out of the fog bank in the morning, and the Yamamoto guy up in the crow's nest spots the Americans, the aircraft carriers, and starts firing on the Gambier Bay from 20 miles away. So you can imagine if you're on that ship, you've got some problems. So the evasion didn't work. They eventually, Yamamoto sunk the aircraft carrier. It was the first naval battle ship to ship where an aircraft carrier was sunk. Those that survived ended up in the water. And in the fog of battle, as we heard earlier, this was a huge battle. The command staff did not know that this ship was lost, and they spent 2.5 days searching, and Norm Loach was one of those in the water. So it's an amazing story. But we had lost our World War II veteran. So I went to our 30-year veteran, Bob Bowles, who not only loves the Navy, but also works hard, and he read the book, and you'll see the video that's up there now, where he has traveled that area himself as a Navy captain. So he was able to relive that point, and it was really, it's up on our website. I mentioned probably shouldn't have said this, but I suggested that if I was a manager in the school district, I would have my staff watch this video. And you know, people, we all think we really got it bad today, right? But nothing was going on in World War II. So I think that, anyway, I don't know whether they'll do that. So the last thing I have is this called Accessibility. Okay? It's not a misspelling, it's just the company's name. It gives access to seeing and hearing impaired viewers, complying with ADA WCAG 2.1. And this is, just as a side note, this is one of the largest litigation areas today out of California and out of New York. If you violate ADA, there's an automatic $4,000, no questions asked violation, plus you have to hire an attorney or settle it. So, so I thought it was a good idea to have it, because we have people that could use the ADA information. And let's see, what else was I gonna say? This doesn't give us, they actually are the first line of defense for us. And I thought for the schools, any kid that has special needs, they probably should have this at the school anyway. So that's the. And also wanted to remind them, we haven't done a live Memorial Day service, but hopefully we'll be able to do it in 2022. And it's good to remember we've done this on the video. Many of you here did in these videos, and that's up at our website also. And the last picture actually is a picture out of early college high school. And we missed the students in the Corona Del Mar lunch. And Denise wanted to say a few words about what's coming up. Any questions?
Thank all of you for everything you do for the schools, for your service, your continued service. And I contacted all the schools this past week and heard back from all of them. They're excited to have you back. We're going to follow a protocol, COVID protocol. So I'm going to be meeting with the assistant superintendent tomorrow, find out what's involved. We have a school that wants to start right away this year, early college high school, and that's going to be the end of November. So anyone that has a PowerPoint presentation, that has experience speaking in the schools, that is interested, please contact me, Doug Milliken, and we'll get you set up. We have 3 days that will be scheduled at early college. And I'm just so excited. We're going to be back at Estancias. I'm really excited about that. I heard back from that school. We haven't been there for a couple of years. But the Corona Del Mar principal, all the schools contacted me. So they really appreciate all of you. The Newport Mesa Unified School District not only had us speak at their meeting, but they actually posted a wonderful article about the Freedom Committee on their website. So if you go onto the Newport Mesa Unified School District website, you will read an article about all of you. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Please, if you want to do a presentation, let us know. If we have the people here that will assist you, but then we'd also ask for others that have their own PowerPoint to help us do it, because it's probably 20 hours from start to finish. And also Pete Riley, I know, has helped with a number of you when you want to do your PowerPoint through Zoom. And so he has offered his services to do that. I think he has done it Saturdays, Sundays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Friday. So he's available, but we want to give him enough lead time. So any questions about the organization or? All right. Thank you for being patient. We would like you to help put the tables away. And yes, oh, the badges. As you go out the back door, the side door, please leave your badges. Yes, and
Well done.